Greetings, comrades, and welcome to How the Red Was Won, a podcast about organizing in the South, Texas fascism, and how to fight back. I'm your host, Jen Big Nasty, and before we jump into it, I'd like to shout out to my two Vulcan tier Patreon subscribers, that is Trill, Turban, and Falconry Finance. If you would like to join them in supporting this project, you can do so on patreon.com/howtheredwaswon. Thank you so much. It really helps make this possible. So let's go ahead and just jump into it. We are recording today's episode on Saturday, March 7th. That means that tomorrow is International Working Women's Day, a holiday that we don't celebrate as much in the West as, personally, I think we should. But joining me here to talk about this underrated holiday is my friend and comrade, my co-host on Workers Lit / Unfit to Print, and she is also on the other side of that podcast, The Socialist Shelf. Please welcome Lenore. Hello.
Hello, I'm Lenore. Small, nice, I don't know.
Small and nice. Those are exactly the words I would use to describe you.
Aw, bless.
Speaking of women, we should all be small and nice.
Yes, I guess you could call me a lapsed Texan. It's been a while since I've really been back.
How long has it been? How long ago did you move away from Texas?
So, God, I was, I am not old. I was not old enough to remember it. I was born there in, like, 93, and it was, like, 95, 96 that we moved, out to where I am now for a little bit further east. Like, and I've gone like intermittently back to visit family and whatnot, but it's been a couple years at this stage since I've been back, and there's reasons for that. Oh boy.
There are reasons for that. We're going to get into a little bit of that in a little while here. I did want to start off with this quote: the Women's Day resolution. In agreement with the class-conscious political and trade union organizations of the proletariat of their respective countries, socialist women of all nationalities have to organize a special Women's Day, which must, above all, promote the propaganda of female suffrage. This demand must be discussed in connection with the whole women's question, according to the socialist conception. Boom. So, Lenore, what is a woman?
I see you have here written your mom.
I did write that.
Which I think is a great answer for anybody who comes up to you and asks that question. I think they're looking for whatever answer they're looking for. It's not that one, so, you know.
It is a correct answer, I think, in most cases, though.
Yeah, most cases, yeah, totally. I was flipping through, our trans listeners will know, Whipping Girl by Julia Serrano. I was flipping through that a little bit before we went to record today. And when I hear the question, what is a woman, right, what I think of is, okay, how is womanhood, right? How is femininity constructed, treated under patriarchy, right? You know, patriarchy would have you believe, right, masculinity, right, strong, tough, natural, grr, flex, yeah. Femininity, in contrast, you know, weak, vulnerable, artificial, you know, please protect me, all that shit. And so this is what Julia Serrano, of course, refers to in the book as traditional sexism, right, misogyny, men rock, women suck, all that. And this works hand in hand, of course, with oppositional sexism, right? These are categories, patriarchs would have you believe, that cannot be blended or moved between you are this way or you are that way, and if you're one adopting the trappings of another, you are considered weird at best, right? So, following on from this, right, what does patriarchy want from us as women, right? It wants uncompensated labor, right? It wants somebody to look after the kids. It wants somebody to be a nurse, wants somebody to do the cleaning, you know.
So and a fuckhole.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah. Those two very important things. Someone to do unpaid household labor and something to put their dick in. That's really what it comes down to. Yeah.
Right. And you don't have to look very far, think very hard to find which occupations under patriarchy in this country and in the American context are feminized, right? Medicine, teaching, basically anything required for reproduction of our particular nuclear family, of our particular social milieu, So if woman is constructed in opposition to man as a class from which man can exploit labor via patriarchy, of course, my relation to it as a trans woman, right? The decision to embrace the characteristics of womanhood, right? To embrace femininity, right? To renounce manhood and become a woman, right? That, of course, is subject to pathologization, right? By agents of patriarchy, right? Anybody who wants to be a woman must either be insane or evil, right? They must want access to, like, women's spaces, to children for, like, nefarious purposes. Of course,
Right.
you see this all over the fucking news.
Right, because why would someone give up that privilege other than for nefarious reasons, right? Yeah.
No, for sure, for sure, and you know, we'll get into what we give up and what I would, you know, have never preferred to have prior to figuring all this out about myself. But yeah, to sort of tie it back into, because I don't want to get us too bogged down in Lenore's trans corner, right?
I mean, that's why you're here. Also, we should definitely rebrand and call the other podcast that Lenore's Trans Corner.
Yes. Let's see. There's a bit here. There's an extract here from page 3, very early on in the book that I found interesting, right? And it's a bit long, but the idea that all anti-trans discrimination arises from the fact that as transgender people we transgress binary gender norms does not resonate completely with my personal experiences. This is Julia Serrano speaking here. As a somewhat eccentric kid, I was given plenty of leeway to opt out of boys' activities and to cultivate an androgynous appearance and persona. I was sometimes teased for being different, for being an atypical or unmasculine boy, but it was nothing compared to the venom that was reserved for those boys who acted downright feminine. And now, as an out transsexual woman, I find that those who wish to ridicule or dismiss me do not simply take me to task for the fact that I failed to conform to gender norms. Instead, more often than not, they mock my femininity. From the perspective of an occasional gender bender or someone on the female to male spectrum, it might seem like binary gender norms are at the core of all anti-trans discrimination, but most of the anti-trans sentiment that I have had to deal with as a transsexual woman is probably better described as misogyny, specifically trans misogyny, which she coins here in this book, right? And thus, you know, a little bit further into the introduction, right, she says that because this traditional sexism, right, this misogyny, is what anti-trans discrimination is steeped in, right? It's not simply enough for us as trans activists, as trans comrades, to challenge binary gender norms. We must also challenge the idea that femininity is inferior to masculinity, right? Trans activism, she says, must be at its core a feminist movement.
Hell yeah, I agree with that. For certain. You know, I'm a cis woman. So I have been gendered this way my whole life, right? I grew up in being put in little dresses and being a very cute little girl and all the things, positive and negative, that come with that. Doing girly activities and things like that. And I was lucky enough as a cis person to never really have to question my place in that. Like, sometimes I didn't like it, that's for damn sure. But it was never something that I questioned if I fit into this. I don't like being put in that box, even though for the most part it does fit me, you know? Being put into this box of, and again, it is just misogyny that view women as small, weak, need to be quiet, need to know their place, all of these things that come from living under this patriarchal structure. That I did take issue with, even though some of those things, I would never call myself small or weak. That is literally why I call myself big, nasty. Like, there are reasons that I branded myself certain ways, right? But I have been playing sports for a very long time, and this whole discussion of, like, trans women in sports is, and I feel like it's very obvious that it is deeply misogynistic, and it always really, I find it strange when cis women agree with the TERF stance on trans women in sports, because it obviously comes from a place that women are weaker and smaller and fragile and couldn't possibly play sports against someone that might have been assigned male at birth. How could they possibly compete against somebody so big and strong? And it's so blatantly misogynistic and so fucking insulting. And I have played full contact sports with and against. I've played with cis men, and I've played with trans women, and I've played with lots of cis women, and it really is very silly to me that anybody that does not, it's very rarely coming from an actual athlete, these ideas either, right? It's always coming from someone that generally doesn't watch women's sports anyway, that does not is not a fan of any women's sport, thinks that they need to protect me from my teammate, you know. Like,
and if it is coming from an athlete, generally it's it's your Riley Gaines sort of person,
it's
right?
A
What
low
I call
tier.
exactly what I call the fake athlete, right? Who's on the grift circuit.
The grift circuit is exactly it, and it's they're also just poor sports. Like, I have lost many a game in my life, right? I've lost so many times, and the idea of me losing and then being like such a little bitch about it, to be like, well, that's because the person that beat me was bigger and stronger, and it's like, well, I mean, yes, in some cases they are. That's what sports fucking are. The better athlete generally wins, and I don't think that has anything to do with their chromosomes. It has to do with training hard, and like, some people do have a biological advantage. Guess what? I'm 5'2". I don't play basketball. You know, I don't have a biological advantage where somebody who is 6'7" might. You know, I'm sorry, I had to.
Excuse me. Yeah, we don't bat an eye when there's somebody like a this is going way back, but like a Yao Ming, right? Who's like, what was he, like 7'6" or something?
The largest Chinese man ever to exist.
Yeah. We don't bat an eye when somebody is particularly tall, when somebody has like a even like the chromosomal makeup like didn't really make the news until like fairly recently. You know, there are people with like some like weird like biological like quirks that okay, so I can build muscle faster or whatever. And you know, it's just accepted as like, yeah, there are some flukes, there are some people that can like do really well at this particular thing for this particular reason, and that's just sports. That's just sports. That's what we come to watch, right?
Yes.
I tend to believe that like I've heard it said, and I tend to agree, that there should be like an Olympics for the purpose of just like juicing yourself up like as much as you possibly can. Just like a bunch of mad scientists sponsor like a bunch of athletes that are just like doped to the gills on whatever within reason, right? And then we just see how far that can go.
Yeah. The HGH Olympics.
But yeah, what you bring up about women's sports though is very relevant, because like it's a wedge that has found purchase, certainly, with a larger segment of the U.S. population than qua bathroom bans did. Right? Because those, you know, to the degree that those were fought against, those flopped fairly consistently legislatively, and it's this thing that's based in, you know, ignorance of how sports works, like this vague pay into fairness, right? It's this thing that's really gotten more people on board with you know, second classing us.
Yes, yeah, and honestly, I know I shouldn't make it all about me as a cis person, but I take it personally insulting, you know, that they're saying that I can't possibly fend for myself against a trans woman, and so somebody else has to look out for me. Fuck you, you know. I'm perfectly capable of making decisions for myself and playing the sports that I want to. Thank you.
If and when I come visit you, we need to record a video of you just kicking my ass.
Yes, I support this.
I will train, and then I will come and I will lose at whatever sport you pick.
I mean, you might beat me at like a tall person sport, though. Biological advantage. You have several inches on me.
Well, HRT does make you shorter.
Have you shrunk?
Like by an inch or so.
That's impressive. I didn't realize that.
Something to do with like the ligaments between your muscles. Anyway.
That sounds terrible. Shrinking ligaments.
No, that's very affirming.
Yeah, true. Yeah, speaking of fucked up things that are very affirming, most of my trans friends I've met as who they are now. I didn't know them like pre-transition, except for one comrade of mine that I've known through a few years during her transition. And she called me one day when she got catcalled for the first time. And it was like insulting and terrifying and strangely affirming for her. And I was like, congrats, you're finally a woman today. Like,
there's a word for that, like, like euphoria, right? Like, as opposed to dysphoria, like something gender happens and cool. Okay, that's euphoria, right? Yes. When something gross happens, but it's like, oh, I guess I am legible as a woman in this particular way.
So fucked up. We live in such a sick society. Ugh. Okay, so I guess the answer to the question, what is a woman? I mean, honestly, it's a social construct. It is whatever you want it to be. It is however you define yourself. I am a different woman than you. You are a different woman than your mother. She is different than my mother. Like, we're all very different people. Trans, cis, those are just adjectives. We're all, I don't know, we're all bitches, really.
Hell yeah. I am proud to wear that label.
Answer. Yes. All right. We can come back to that if we think of any more funny things. But I did have a large chunk of this as the history of International Working Women's Day. I think a lot of people in the US, in the West in general, have maybe in passing heard about International Women's Day. It is not something that is really big here. It is not something that's really talked about. You might see companies make a tweet about it. You might see a meme on Instagram that Target is giving a 10% discount on panties, or like really dumb shit, right? But it is not something that is really widely celebrated or even talked about here. But I wanted to get into the history of it because globally, it is considered International Working Women's Day, at least specifically in the socialist countries, because it has very socialist roots. And so most of this information here I took from a Jacobin article that I will link in the show notes, and then I also have some stuff from a magazine called Origins, and from the IWD website, that's International Women's Day website. I will link all of those things in the show notes. So I'm just going to jump in to a little bit of this history, and Lenore, feel free to jump in, where you see fit.
Yeah, for sure. I was going over it a little bit before we went to record here, but like largely, like I knew about the co-optation of like regular like Labor Day, like May Day, but that this happened to International Working Women's Day, I definitely wasn't aware of. So this is going to be a learning experience for me.
Yeah. I honestly didn't really know that this was as big of a deal as it was until I was in Vietnam 2 years ago on International Working Women's Day. And like I said, the socialist countries really, really go all out for it, and it made me feel very pretty and very special.
Yeah.
So let's jump into this history here. In 1894, that was a long time ago, in 1894, Clara Zetkin took to the pages of the Social Democratic women's magazine Die Gleichheit. Thank you, that's my German. That word means equality. And it is a magazine that she had actually founded 3 years earlier. And she went there to criticize mainstream German feminism. Quote, bourgeois feminism and the movement of proletarian women are two fundamentally different social movements, end quote. And so, according to her, to Zetkin, bourgeois feminists pushed for reforms through a struggle between the sexes and against men of their own class, without even questioning the existence of capitalism. But by contrast, working women, through a struggle of class against class in a joint fight with the men of their own class versus the bourgeoisie, sought to transcend capitalism. So from the beginning, this was actually an anti-capitalist thing that has very much been stripped of that in the U.S. for obvious reasons. So by the year 1900, women in the German Social Democratic Party, that is the SPD, were holding biannual conferences before party congresses, right? So those are conferences where the issues of the proletarian women's movement were discussed. This ideological and organizational strength turned the German socialist working women's movement into the backbone of the international socialist women's movement. And then a few years later, in 1907, the International Conference of Socialist Women convened in Germany for its first gathering, stating that its main demand, quote, the right to universal female suffrage without qualifications of property, tax, education, or any other kind of barrier which may hinder members of the working class from availing themselves of their political rights, end quote. The struggle for these rights, the delegates insisted, was to be carried out, quote, not together with the women's bourgeois movement, but in close cooperation with socialist parties, end quote, thus explicitly separating the movement for working women from that of bourgeois women.
See, they saw girl boss feminism coming a mile away.
100 years ago. Which makes it honestly even more insidious that the US did it anyway, you know, because of course they did. Okay, the invitation to the next International Conference of Socialist Women, which was 3 years later, so that's 1910, in Copenhagen, exhibited the same adherence to the proletarian class struggle. Quote, we urgently call on all the socialist parties and organizations of socialist women, as well as on the working women's organizations standing on the foundation of the class struggle, to send their delegates to this conference, end quote. So again, literally all about proletarian working women. So around the same time, the first Women's Day celebration took place in Chicago. That was in May of 1908. It was organized by the U.S. Socialist Party, and it brought together an audience of about 1,500 women who demanded economic and political equality on a day officially dedicated to the female workers' causes. So even in the U.S., it did start as a socialist movement. Following the example of their American comrades, the German delegate Louise Zeitz, Zeitz, that's fun to say, proposed the proclamation of an International Women's Day to be celebrated annually. Zetkin seconded the proposal along with 100 female delegates from 17 countries. For the delegates, supporting the socialist conception meant promoting not just female suffrage, but labor legislation for working women, social assistance for mothers and children, equal treatment of single mothers, provision of nurseries and kindergartens, distribution of free meals and free educational facilities in schools, and international solidarity. International Women's Day was, from the very beginning, a working women's day. While its immediate objective was to win universal female suffrage, its aspirations were much grander. The overthrow of capitalism and the triumph of socialism, abolishing both the wage slavery of workers and the domestic slavery of women through the socialization of education and care work. This is something you touched on earlier, right? The free labor that women are always expected to give in the homes, and really in the community in general.
It shows you just how wrong and insane the class reductionist chauvinists are that we were discussing earlier, right? That from the beginning there has been this continuity of demand to not just overthrow the dominance of the bourgeois, not to just overthrow the dominance of the owning class, but to overthrow the dominance of any class that would seek to appropriate the labor of the others, right? Mm-hmm. And of course, this is not in quite the same ways, but this is like whiteness versus non-whiteness. This is men versus women. This is any class, this is any class that has benefited at the expense of another, right? And yeah, to pretend that this is like superfluous to the class struggle is to miss the point, right? As socialists, we are against all oppression, all exploitation. It will always happen.
Except the oppression of the bourgeoisie. I'm pro that.
Yes.
I am pro dictatorship of the proletariat.
Mm-hmm.
But that's different.
Because when everyone is proletarian, no one will be.
Beautiful. Celebrating International Women's Day on March 8th took hold as a worldwide practice in 1914. A famous sign emblazoned with the words, Women's Day, March 8th, 1914, forward with female suffrage, in which a woman dressed in black waves the red flag, marked the occasion. In Germany, so this is Germany 1914, overcome with hysteria in the lead up to World War I, police prohibited the poster from being hung or distributed publicly. The Fourth International Women's Day turned into a mass action against the imperialist war that would become a reality only 3 months later. So right before the outbreak of the full, good old World War I that we really don't talk about enough.
Right. Which, major shatter point, major setback for the movement, in the context of the Second International, right, in the context of a bunch of socialist formations, ending up on the national chauvinist side of things. Clara Zetkin, of course, as, anti-war to the hilt. She fell in on the correct side of history in this regard.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. Let's see. In early November 1914, Clara Zetkin issued an appeal to the socialist women of all countries, where she spoke out strongly against the war and in favor of mass actions for peace. As part of this opposition to imperialism, Zetkin convened the third and final Socialist Women's Conference in April 1915, which Lenin came to along with the Bolshevik delegation, including also his wife Krupskaya and Liliana Zinoviev.
This is important because it is ultimately the 1917 Women's Day demonstration in what was then St. Petersburg. Mm-hmm. That led to the February Revolution. Of course, it was March. It was March then, according to the Julian calendar. But yeah, that's the point. It's again, the feminist cause, it has been at the vanguard of revolution, including the revolution.
The revolution, right?
That resulted in the first, major worker state.
Yes, hell yes. Communist parties continued to celebrate International Women's Day under the slogan, all power to the councils, all power to socialism. And in June 1921, Clara Zetkin helped to make it official. The Second International Conference of Communist Women, chaired by Zetkin, was held in Moscow and proclaimed that in the future, International Working Women's Day would be celebrated around the world on March 8th. And so ever since then, International Working Women's Day celebrations have been held on March 8th in countries, literally pretty much every country across the globe, serving as an annual reminder of the revolutionary potential of working women. We do be holding up half the sky,
Mm-hmm. And it's interesting. One of the articles that you linked, I was reading here on Origins, right? 1975, of course, International Women's Year, is when the United States first celebrates a version of International Women's Day. And 2 years later, right, in 77, right, the General Assembly proclaims a United Nations Day for women's rights and international peace. All well and good, right? But it is part of, on paper, yes, but it is part of a global effort to divorce this day from its revolutionary origins.
Oh, they love to do that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
They love to take a little kernel of it. And like what you mentioned earlier, the difference in May Day and Labor Day. The way we're like, yeah, well, let's just take it and make it much less revolutionary.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Always. So the U.S. has basically turned it into a 501c3 charity event. These next couple of sentences are direct quotes from the website IWD, which is just International Women's Day. They leave off the other W. It's tough to read. This makes me so mad. These are all quotes. Imagine a gender equal world. A world free of bias, stereotypes, and discrimination. A world that's diverse, equitable, and inclusive. A world where difference is valued and celebrated. Together, we can forge gender equality. Get ready for hashtag IWD 2026.
The hashtag begs to be pronounced.
It has to. Okay, I got one more from that same website. International Women's Day, IWD, has been around for over 100 years, as have many of the issues still impacting women's advancement. Since 1911, IWD belongs to all who care about gender equality. Celebrate women's achievement. Raise awareness about discrimination. Take action to forge gender parity. All IWD activity is valid. That's what makes IWD so inclusive.
It's so heckin' valid, you guys.
I feel so heckin' included.
God.
God.
This reminds me of, like, there are people who will, in bad faith, right, say that, because I am, I'm a very femme, like, trans woman, and there are people who are in bad faith saying, well, like, you're shattering this gender boundary, like, why are you being, like, stereotypically feminine, right? Aren't you just reinforcing a gender binary? And it's like, no, how could I be reinforcing a gender binary when I'm putting myself in a category that's routinely demonized, right, for existing as I am, right? And that's and it's a similar sort of dynamic here, right? You can make all the proclamations, you can make all the idealistic statements in the world, like we can imagine a gender equal world and just go out and live our truth, and somehow we're not going to face any backlash from the existing forces of patriarchy. Like, would it be cool to live in a post-gender world? Maybe, sure, where all your intrinsic inclinations can be displayed and not immediately like categorized one way or another. But we don't, right?
Right.
We don't.
And like, I mean, this is so obviously toothless in every possible way, and it completely removes the class aspect, because of course it does. But yeah, it's not even good, I think, by liberal standards, because I would say if I was a good lib and writing a statement like this, I would talk about it, at the very least, some of the women that are under the most oppression right now, which would be trans women, queer women, immigrant women. Like, it doesn't even bother to name this like struggle that is different for certain types of women. And it's just like, we're all equal.
Women in war zones right now, like on the front lines of U.S. empire. I'm thinking Gaza, I'm thinking Iran right now. Oh my God.
I'm sorry, we didn't free Iran by bombing their capital? Is that not what happened?
Oh God. The stuff coming out about Tehran and about why it's actually like really, really cool to bomb Iran and to liberate people from like no question, like, is the government of Iran reactionary in certain ways on gender? Sure. But also, like, that doesn't mean we need to bomb people to free them from wearing one or another thing, right?
Does bombing people not make them more woke?
God, it's clearly, like, we just haven't invented a bomb that's big enough.
That's what it is. It is wild to me, and I don't think they're really pushing it that hard. They don't have to manufacture consent anymore. The government just does what it wants, and it doesn't matter. But they did try briefly to manufacture some consent, and it's all about this like mandatory hijab thing,
right?
Which is absolutely just silly. If you think about it with two brain cells.
Should you be able to wear whatever you want? Sure. But also, like, they graduate more women from college than we do. They graduate they have more physicists than we do. They have more women in all the sciences, right?
Doctors.
It's, is it perfect? No, but, like, there's multiple dimensions to this.
Right. It's never just... And the Western concept of femininity is always like, liberation is when bikini, and, like, literally, like, stops at that. Women aren't liberated unless they are objectified. Come on now. We need that male gaze.
Yeah, some of the memes that I've been seeing about, oh man, there's a whole bunch of like Persian beauties about to get on OnlyFans, and it's just vomit.
That is fucking disgusting.
Yeah.
Okay, well that just made me nauseous. Cool. I hadn't seen that.
Patriarchy, y'all.
Hey, so how is this holiday celebrated worldwide? It's actually fucking celebrated, especially in communist countries. Like I mentioned, I was in Vietnam for International Working Women's Day in 2024. I was in Hanoi specifically, and like I was there for kind of like the week before and the week after. It was kind of like right in the middle of the trip, and the city was like alive with getting ready for this holiday. It actually also just it comes right after the Lunar New Year. So there was all kinds of stuff. That was the year of the dragon. There were dragons everywhere, the red lanterns and all of that stuff is beautiful. But then leading into that was International Working Women's Day, where there are flowers everywhere. All of the shops were selling flowers. Like everybody buys the women in their life flowers for this holiday. Like you're an asshole if you don't is kind of how I understand that. So I was there as a delegate with the Communist Party, and we were meeting with different CP Vietnam groups and people that work with the party, and we were given these like beautiful orange roses. A few days later, after the delegation ended, and I just was like, spend another week in Hanoi on my own. I went and got tattooed, and the tattoo shop is giving me flowers. Like, it was just, my cab drivers were telling me Happy International Women's Day. Like, literally, it is everywhere. Everybody is like, oh, a lady, Happy Women's Day. We love women. We love you. Like, it was just the coolest thing.
It's like waking up in another dimension.
Where they appreciate women. What the fuck? That's crazy. Yeah. It was pretty cool.
There's a little note card that's like, it's all colorful and cute and very, very, very delicately lettered that says Happy Women's Month, and it's up on a shelf at my work, and that's it.
That's what you get.
Mm-hmm.
You're so appreciated.
Mm-hmm.
A dusty card on the back of the shelf.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we got a long way to go. Okay, I wrote a massive list of stats. I started this, I was going to try to keep it simple, and then, like, the more I kept reading about all of these things, the more angry I got in so many ways, and just the more information, that kept coming up. So I guess we can just go through this in order, and you added some stuff to the list, which is really cool, so we'll just jump around here and see how it goes. So I started off with the gender pay gap, something that is often talked about, but it isn't really addressed, right? Like, it's something that we've all heard about it, but it is very rarely talked about how to fix these things. So in the US, it is 82%. Women make 82% of what men make, generally speaking, on average. You added a note here that said for trans women, it's actually 60%.
Yeah, 60%, and again, of course, that is full-time workers.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of us aren't able to get full-time work.
Mm-hmm. And that's not even addressing the racial disparities. I didn't even write those numbers down.
Oh yeah. There was we'll get into it, of course, but like the poverty rate is 1 in 5 for queer adults. Broadly, 29% for trans adults broadly. It's 40% if you're also black. It's 45% if you're also Latina. So there is that dimension as well.
Yeah, and that affects obviously poverty is related to the pay. Anyway, the numbers I had, something I did find interesting, because I wanted to compare basically US, UK to like socialist nations. Specifically, I was looking up Cuba and China, which are very different in a lot of ways. For obvious reasons, Cuba is a tiny island that has been under a massive trade embargo for decades. And so some of the numbers here don't look great for Cuba, but the reason for that is US imperialism. And China's are actually in a lot of ways fairly on par with the US, and that is for a lot of reasons as well, especially considering they have so many people living in very rural areas. But they are actually making huge strides to connect people with their rail. So the pay gap in the UK is 93%. They've actually done a pretty good job of lifting women's wages. The best in the world is Belgium, 99%. Damn
Really?
near equal. Yeah, isn't that wild? Yeah, Belgium. Who would have expected?
Okay, cool. They did one cool thing.
That's it. They have some good beers. I'll give them that.
True.
China actually has laws that are enforcing pay equality, but it just quite hasn't caught up everywhere yet. So they're at about 80%, and Cuba's is at about 50%. Like it's a pretty large gender pay gap. And when I was reading about it, they actually have more women, as you mentioned, in Iran, more women graduating these STEM type programs, doctors and stuff like that. But in Cuba, the highest paying jobs are cab drivers for tourists because they're getting tips, and it's not regulated the same way that like salaried positions are. And those cab drivers are mostly men, so they're making so much more money because they're working in the tourist industry.
That's so wild. Oh my
Isn't
god.
that interesting? Yeah, because I would feel like being a cab driver probably just isn't as safe for women because of misogyny. Okay, life expectancy. There is some interesting stuff here. In the U.S., so this is just for women that I pulled. When you look at men, it pulls the average down in literally every country because men do be dying. But in the U.S., the female life expectancy is 81 years. UK is 83. Cuba's 82. China's 81. They're all pretty close there. The best one was Monaco, 88.
Because that's a tax shelter in disguise as a country.
Just rich people, yeah.
Yeah.
And in Palestine, it was 76, and in the last few years, it has dropped to 40. The average life expectancy for a woman in Palestine right now is 40 years old. Yeah.
Insane.
And then you put another really sad statistic on here, too.
Yeah, there is a claim that floats around that sets the life expectancy for trans women in this country at 35. It's unsourced. There's not a basis for that specific number, but there is a, I'll dig it up for you and send it to you. But there have been studies put out. I'm thinking of the one specifically by Duke University back in 2022 that indicates that yes, we do face a higher mortality rate, not just trans women, but trans people in general, at almost every age, higher than non-trans people.
Mm-hmm. And that's because of murder.
Murder and suicide, right? From the
yeah.
from the stresses of living in a country that's doing an act of genocide on us, right?
Correct.
New Hampshire's State House just passed a bathroom ban for the third time. No word on whether Kelly Ayotte will actually veto it again or cave on it, but they're really going fucking hard at this.
Is New Hampshire the live free or die state?
Yeah, it's the weird I mean, New Mexico had the libertarian governor, of course, Gary Johnson, but if you had to point on the map to a libertarian state just culturally, that'd be New Hampshire. It's in a sea of fairly a liberal policy. There's some regressive stuff.
Interesting.
Yes,
Were
Sheila,
they
I
one
agree.
of the first to legalize gay marriage?
That was Massachusetts.
Oh, okay. They were early, though. I mean, Texas has a ban on gay marriage, so if and when Obergefell gets overturned, Texas has an automatic, much like we did with abortion. As soon as the federal case gets overturned, we have bans in place. Just ready to go.
I live in Georgia, listeners, where we have that heartbeat bill. Where it's basically, after 6 weeks, after detectable fetal activity, you can't get an abortion. You gotta go to fucking Virginia.
Well, yeah, let's jump to that. Abortion bans. So the U.S. has full abortion bans in 13 states. That is, of course, including Texas. And then those really absurd gestational limits, heartbeat bills between 6 and 12 weeks. It lumped y'all together. There are 6 states that have those, and that is including Georgia. That is essentially a ban. A lot of people do not know they're pregnant at 6 weeks, especially if you have irregular periods or you're on some sort of birth control that happened to fail. People don't know. It is essentially a full ban. Texas doesn't even have carve-outs for rape and incest.
Jesus.
They do technically for life of the mother, but multiple pregnant women have died because the hospital was afraid the doctors in the hospital, whoever's in charge, whoever makes these decisions, didn't want to get in trouble. So they waited too long, and these people either went septic or bled out or whatever happened.
Yeah, and that's the thing, right? Who gets to make the decision, like if it's necessary for the life of the mother? Not the mother, certainly. And the exceptions for rape and incest as well. Like similarly, like it's a similar smokescreen because again, like you have to prove in a court of law that you've been raped. You have to prove in a court of law that somebody's committed incest on you. Like it sounds like. In much the same way as bans on trans people existing in public life, like the Kansas driver's license thing that where we have to surrender our driver's license if we live in Kansas, right? And if we change our gender marker, or even if we haven't, like they're like looking, right, for that shit. Like in exactly the same way that quote unquote reasonable bans and restrictions on women's sports are used to prepare the way for other ways of banning us from public life. The rape, incest, life of the mother thing. It
makes them feel better.
Exactly.
It makes liberals feel better about it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
When it should be all or nothing, right? It's a matter of bodily autonomy, just as trans healthcare is.
Yes. And with the rape question, we know how fast and efficient our legal system is. So yeah.
I have so I was born in Arlington, Texas, and this is obviously before it got really, really bad. This was in 1993. So like Roe v. Wade was in place at that time, right? You had the right to an abortion nationwide. But preliminary tests that my mom had done when she was pregnant with me suggested that I might be like developmentally disabled in some way, right? So she had to get an amniocentesis to determine, if that was true. It turned out not to be. They would have prepared to raise me and love me, no matter what, right? But they just had to know it was coming. And initially, the hospital didn't want to let her go in and get this amniocentesis, this test of amniotic fluid to determine this shit. They didn't want to let her do it because, and this was their words, not hers, they thought she was fishing for a reason to get an abortion.
She didn't even need one at the time.
Right. And this was and this was when like you could have gotten one like if you wanted one, right? So like it's not even just abortion. It's like any decision related to your health care. And again, can't stress this enough. That's with Roe v. Wade in place. That is with the bare minimum.
Right.
Right? And it shows you just how far we still had to go and how much further we now have to go.
God, so much further. Yeah, Roe v. Wade was always like what is the word I'm looking for? The minimum. It was always just the minimum. It was never going to be enough. Just a couple more notes on states in the U.S. There are 9 states and Washington, D.C. that have no gestational limits, which I found interesting. And good, obviously. Like, people make a big deal about late-term abortion, but that is always because something is horribly wrong with one of the people involved.
Yeah.
Something else that I think is interesting, Vietnam has one of the highest abortion rates in the world. About 40% of all pregnancies end in elective abortion in Vietnam. And this is something I learned about while I was there, talking to some people there. They have no restrictions. You can have an abortion at any time for whatever reason. They do not care. I don't think they even really ask questions. But the reason that the rate is so high is because there is poor sexual education. So people that accidentally get pregnant can terminate the pregnancy, but they are not necessarily given the education and tools to prevent it in the first place. Which it was interesting, yeah. And a lot of that is because of cultural taboos talking about sexuality. It is a fairly conservative, I grew up with Vietnamese family. Fairly conservative, don't talk about that kind of stuff. And so because of that, there are a lot of unplanned and unwanted pregnancies. And so it is something that the party is actively working to combat, without stepping on like cultural toes, but also like giving people the tools they need to maybe prevent having to do this in the first place.
Right, because it's just easier to prevent,
It's just easy. It's cheaper. It's easier on your body. In so many ways, it definitely is the better choice, I think. What's funny, I grew up with Vietnamese family, and my mom never had like the talk with me, but when I was in fourth grade, she gave me a copy of Our Bodies Ourselves,
Mhm.
and I read it cover to cover, fascinated. I was like, I'm sorry, what is gonna happen to me? This is fucking crazy. And I remember taking it to slumber parties, and so all my friends read it, and we all educated ourselves via this book. The book has been updated throughout the years. Highly recommend it. Just give that to your kid if you don't want to have the talk. It's good shit. Okay, we did life expectancy. We did pay. We did abortion. We touched on poverty rate, but I don't think we really went through that. So let's jump back to money. This is interesting when I was trying to compare it across different countries. It's just measured differently, and like what is considered poverty in one place, if you're trying to put numbers to it, it's very hard to compare that across the board. So it was a little tough to look at, but if we're kind of zoom out, at least in the US, by US standards, 11% of women, that is, 18 and older, that's a woman. It was weird that they specified that. But it's about 14.8 million women in the US lived in what we consider poverty in 2024. And if you ask me, that rate is very, very low.
Well, the federal poverty rate is what's the
It's
word?
like $11,000 a year. It's something
no, that's
impossible.
insane. Like I believe the way it was determined was 50 years ago or so. It was mathed out like, okay, your average person can exist, like starving, but existing on this particular figure. Let's multiply that times 3, and then, okay, we'll adjust for inflation, and that's literally it.
That's
right?
literally it.
You tell me, you mentioned, I think now it's like 11,000. You show me somebody in this country that exists on $11,000 a year. You can't.
And has a apartment that they can live in. Yeah. And then, of course, those rates are higher for racialized women.
Right.
For black women, the poverty rate is 17.8%, Latinas 15.2%, Native American women 19.4%.
Jesus.
And nearly 1 in 3, so 30% of families headed by single women with children were quote-unquote poor in 2024. Again, that didn't have a determining for that, but I think we know what that feels like, even if we don't have an exact rate. Obviously, single women trying to raise children, it's very difficult. And also, 3 out of 5 seniors lived in poverty as well.
Yeah, because as I said, 1 in 5 for queer adults, 29%, so a little, higher even than that for transgender adults. And again, if you're black, if you're Latina, like 45%, like it's even worse. It's one thing to be a minority, but to be a minority of a minority, right? It's just so many interlocking axes of oppression.
Those intersections of oppression they're multipliers.
Mm-hmm.
So talking about maternal mortality, I think that is a really important thing to look at when we consider how women are treated in a country. Maternal mortality is determined by deaths per 100,000 live births. I don't know why that number was chosen, because in a moment we're going to talk about infant mortality, which is deaths per 1,000. Why do they put those numbers differently? I don't know. Probably to be confusing. But maternal mortality, deaths per 100,000 live births up until 42 days after giving birth. So if you survive giving birth, but then 2 weeks later you die, that is considered part of the maternal mortality rate.
Okay, I didn't know that.
The U.S. has the highest in the quote-unquote developed Western world, with 21.1 maternal deaths per 100,000 live births. And I originally was like, oh, that's because healthcare is so expensive here, duh. And then the more I read about it, it's actually even worse than that. It is due to drug overdose, suicide, and homicide.
Jesus.
That is the number one killer of women within 42 days after they give birth. The drug overdose one, my assumption is that people that got clean while they were pregnant decided to start using again. And quite often when people relapse, they go to a higher dose when they're not used to it. And that's why they die. Homicide is the number one killer of pregnant women in the US by their partner. Being pregnant is the most dangerous time in your life, and it is because you're at the highest risk of being murdered by your partner. Shout out to straight women. Why?
Yeah. Good God.
And then suicide is likely very linked to postpartum depression and not having access to the help that they need. Either it's having to go back to work too soon, or their partner had to go back to work and there's nobody there at home with them and they can't handle it. Really sad. Other numbers, the UK's is only 9.8. Cuba's is fairly high, 39. And I think a lot of that is just due to the embargo and not having access to everything that they need. China's is 23. The best in the world, though, Belarus, Poland, and Switzerland, it is only 1 to 2. 1 or 2 per 100,000 live births. This staggering difference. The worst in the world is South Sudan. Again, obvious reasons. 1,223
Wow.
women die after giving birth. Yeah. It's not great. It's not great. Infant mortality, again, that is deaths per 1,000 live births. All the countries I looked at were fairly on par. US is 6, UK is 4, Cuba 7, China's 5. The best in the world were Japan, Norway, and Finland, less than 2. Palestine, you know these numbers are going to be bad. And it's hard even to track right now. It was around 12 before the genocide started, and right now they're looking at it's anywhere between 40 and 104
Good
infants
God.
die. Yeah.
Well, because they don't have hospitals anymore.
Because they don't have hospitals anymore. They're being born in tents. Yeah, and they don't have access to clean water, and yeah, it's pretty bad.
Sickening.
It's pretty bad. Okay. Let's go to something a little more exciting. The right to vote. So women in the USSR won the right to vote March 19th, 1917. That was under the provisional government before the October Revolution. It was something that you mentioned earlier. Women played a very large part in that pre-revolution. There were the 2 revolutions that year. Before the Bolsheviks really even had the power to come and take over, there was that provisional government that was made from like 3 different parties. There were liberals involved. That's a funny sentence. There were liberals involved. But women won that right to vote even then. In the U.S., of course, we know that white women got the right to vote in August of 1920, but black women did not until the 1965 Voting Rights Act.
It's such a weird like there's not a clean progression to like women in politics in this country as well. Like it went state by state of course as always these fucking things do before before
official women's suffrage.
Before the 19th Amendment dropped. But like even before that you had as well, I believe the representative at large from Minnesota was Jeanette Rankin, and she served in Congress. She was the first woman to do so, but like that was before like I think that was before like women could even vote to senator there. I don't know. Wow. Montana may have been different.
Interesting. I didn't know that.
Also, the only and she was she obviously had a problem. She was a Republican like her whole life. The party evolves and changes.
It was different
of course.
then, yeah.
But interesting to note, she's the only person who voted against both world wars.
Wow.
Oh yeah, she got death threats for that.
I bet. Here's something that I found interesting. 80% of the countries in Africa granted citizens universal suffrage between 1950 and 1975.
Let's go.
And this was the period of decolonization. So the women were not allowed to vote under these colonial governments, but when all of these places had their revolutions and were able to kick out the colonists, women were they won the right to vote that way. Many independent nations adopted universal suffrage when they put their new governments and constitutions into place. So colonialists once again being on the wrong side of everything. Okay, here's another bad one. Child marriage. And This, of course, affects women far more than men. The numbers of people that are married off before they are adults is quite disproportionately little girls, more so than little boys. It is little girls being married off to full-grown men. In the U.S., 34, that is more than half, 34 states allow for child marriage.
Jesus.
That is including Texas. Yeah, it's not great.
I think New Hampshire again is one of those as well. I think you can get married as young as 13 with parental consent. It's insane. It's nutty. And like,
yes, most of these are with parental consent, as if that matters.
Well, exactly, because of course, like the parents are going to be like, okay, like you have to marry that person, so like our families, it's very medieval, it's very regressive and patriarchal, and like it is out of all proportion to how medieval and regressive and patriarchal it is, right? Out of all proportion to that, right? It is wild how normalized it is in our culture, right? Purity balls are alive and well, right? In like evangelical culture, like, if you're a girl growing up in this, like you pledge yourself to like Jesus or whatever, and then to your hypothetical husband, like, to your daddy as well, like daddy daughter, like Ill Conceived is a great podcast on the whole on that whole side of America. Like it is outsized, powerful, it is alive and well, and it is bizarre. Like, if it's ever brought up in mainstream media at all, it's just as, like, an interesting, like, curiosity.
Mm-hmm.
Never critically engaged with.
No, of course not. Globally, approximately 20% of girls are married before the age of 18.
Jesus.
Yeah, it's pretty bad. The governments of Belgium, Canada, the Netherlands, Norway, the UK, and the European Union, I put this in italics, support initiatives to end child marriage. But despite legal prohibitions in many countries, enforcement is often weak in rural areas due to, lack of resources, and nobody's reporting something that the community is okay with. If this is what your community does and it's normal for a 28-year-old man to marry a 14-year-old girl, no one is going to report that to the authorities.
Again, one reason that you need, if there's a revolution in this country, right, you're going to need a state apparatus to root out a lot of this stuff in small towns.
Yes, a authoritarian state apparatus.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, let's talk about some gay shit.
Hell yeah.
In the U.S., queer rights are under attack from all sides. Obergefell did become the law, gay marriage, in 2015, but just as easily as Roe was overturned by a Supreme Court decision, that can happen to Obergefell, and they openly want to do that. Like,
right.
It is on the agenda.
Right, and there's so much. I mean, you can delve into a lot of history around the movement for queer rights in the United States, right, and see just how far this. Yes, Sheila, I agree.
She's screaming.
Sheila herself is gay. I've decided this. But yeah, you can see just how far how narrow the limits of the so-called NGO industrial complex are as far as queer rights go in this country, right? Because a lot of queer nonprofits saw their funding dry up, saw volunteering activism dry up once gay rights were achieved. Because the perception was, especially from a lot of the wealthy patrons that drove the funding and organization against like Proposition 8 and whatnot, and of course, all these things should be overturned, all these restrictions and stuff should be overturned, yes, but like a lot of the, there are just more gay billionaires than trans billionaires, there's just more resources to fight for this one specific wedge of queer rights than for like certain others, right?
And it's just so easy to, I've seen way too many memes, of course on Twitter, where they're just like cutting the T off of the end of the acronym. Because it's so easy for them to just do that. Gay marriage is performed in 38 nations, which is approximately 20% of the world. And again, marriage is not the only thing that matters when we're talking about queer rights. But it is because it is a legal thing, it's something that is easy to point to and track.
Mm-hmm.
60-ish nations criminalize homosexuality. And again, that can look like different things. A lot of these are like sodomy laws, which is crazy that those, they still exist in Texas. Like, we forget that there was this huge weird protest movement years ago where students were taking dildos. It happened on the UT campus because dildos were banned, but guns were not. And so students were like open carrying sex toys, like as a form of protest.
That's pretty funny.
It's pretty funny. Yeah. I'm fine with that. But I wanted to mention Cuba's family code referendum that happened in 2022. This was passed by a supermajority vote of the population. Cuba does a lot of direct ballot initiatives, I think is the word I'm looking for. Direct ballot initiatives to make sure that they have popular support for things. And there was a lot of organizing around getting this to happen. It had failed a few years before. All of this information I took from Liberation, which is the PSL zine or whatever, from their website. So just some quick information on this. So Cuba had a 1975 family code, and obviously a lot had happened since 1975. Worldwide movements for queer rights and women's liberation, as well as equal rights for disabled people, seniors, and the rights of children. This law covered all of that, and this spurred Cuba to put into law many new social practices and norms and to expand new ones, especially full rights for LGBTQ people. So for several years, the Cuban government and the Cuban National Sex Education Center have sponsored national days against homophobia and transphobia, which had been promoted in schools and throughout community activities. So in that 45 years since the first family code, the right to same-sex marriage and adoption and other guarantees for the LGBTQ community became really essential to make a new family code, to really just include all of those rights, to really like solidify them. The new family code makes significant changes to the adoption process. It used to be only straight married couples could adopt, and so the new code empowers all couples, straight or gay, married or single, can adopt children. And let's see, it is this subject that became perhaps the biggest point of contention due to prejudices within some of the population and patriarchal ideals to be grappled with. Don't forget that there is a lot of Catholicism in Cuba still.
We talked about this on Workers Lit last summer, I believe in July. We talked about this. There's a book out called Rainbow Solidarity in Defense of Cuba, which was written by the great Leslie Feinberg, and it lays out the long path that Cuba had to get from queerphobia left over from the Batista days, right? Left over from its long history of patriarchal Catholicism, but all compounded by the perception, the incorrect perception, but it didn't fall out of the sky, that that queerness was something like foreign, something like Western, right? Because it was like exclusively relegated to a black market that was accessible only to like wealthy Westerners, right? So like, that perception had to be undone, that had to be struggled against, and it is proof positive that Cuba's revolutionary state project, how you can go from that to literally a country on the forefront of queer rights, as we'll get into.
Yeah, I mean, one of the best and strongest queer rights laws in the whole world. Here's something frustrating. The U.S. government weighed in with funding to right-wing Cubans in Miami. Go figure. And counter-revolutionaries and religious entities on the island that sought to demonize the societal progress detailed in the Families Code. Those reactionaries, however, were not given an airing by Cuba's media or any of Cuba's leading bodies, as their views run contrary to Cuba's socialist ideals, its constitution, and the Families Code.
Oh, but Jen, that sounds so totalitarian. What about the free speech?
What about freedom of the media?
Yeah, no, I'm sorry. You don't get free speech if your speech is that like some people should have rights and others should not. Sorry.
I have a friend in Vietnam. He is an American, but he's lived there for over a decade, and he is married to a trans woman. She transitioned since they had been together. And so we talked a lot about, and she's amazing. I love her. I was like, can I have your wife? She is lovely. She was amazing. But just talking about the laws there around it. And so she was able to get some procedures done in Vietnam, but also, Thailand is close by, and they're pretty good to get a lot of that other stuff.
The cutting edge of trans surgery, yeah.
Legitimately, yeah. So, but we talked about just the laws around it in Vietnam, and they think that, because again, like, Vietnam is a socialist country, but they are very socially conservative in a lot of ways. And they think that now she doesn't get the transphobia that happens here. It is very different for her. She works a very public facing job at a hotel and really does not worry much about getting like hate crimes or anything like that.
Any trans person in this country who works a public facing job, especially depending on where you are, is braver than any U.S. Marine.
This is 100% true. But they told me that they think that the trans stuff, if you will, for lack of a better term, will become more legalized there before gay marriage even will be, which I thought was interesting. And again, every country is developing at its own rate, and I think that Vietnam is doing a lot of things the best they can, and they're working through the contradictions on their own, right? That's not to throw shade at their country.
Right. Well, because as far as the medical stuff, like, I imagine you can get, like, estradiol over the counter there. You can in China.
Yeah, pretty much. Bottom surgery she had to go out of the country for.
Yeah.
But, yeah. It's just because they don't have doctors doing that there yet.
Yeah,
you know?
It's the same here. Like, there's nobody in Georgia that does it. Like, I think the closest is, like, somebody in Miami. Like, it's there's progress being made there. There's, like, people actively, like, you know, going into this field, but it's still very niche.
Yeah. And it will be until we have liberation of trans
people. Until we have transgender
country.
for everybody.
Transgender for everybody. Man, I really wish that had taken off. Speaking of transgender for everybody, let's talk a little bit about specifically laws around trans people. The U.S. is openly engaging in trans genocide. I really don't think that there's another way to phrase that. Obviously, some people are safer in some places than others. I definitely don't fault people for leaving states like Texas. I know several trans people that have moved to Colorado or Chicago or California, places that have a little more safety in place. But federally, it's still very bad. And honestly, I think that any country that's like, you're fine here, but not here, is kind of fucked up. Like,
oh, yeah. Well, I mean, it's you don't have to go back very far into American history, back to your American, like, history high school classes, to find a parallel, right? Which is slavery, right? Yes. You have a class Jim Crow, of people, at least, yeah. You have a class of people who is super exploited, especially in, like, one particular location. Some states are slaves, some states are free. The fact of like this existing like half and half, you know, was never tenable to begin with, but also, like, while it did exist, right, where was the slant, right? The slant was in favor of the slave states. The Fugitive Slave Act was passed. Roger Taney, at that time, I think, Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, he himself was a slaver. Like, they got everything they wanted, the Southern plantation class did. And guess what? They still started a fucking civil war over it.
Still bitching. The 3/5 compromise, literally called that to compromise.
Yeah, exactly. And you fast forward to today, you know, how can you be a major bourgeois party and claim to be the party protecting trans rights? I'm talking about the Democrats here, of course. How can you be in favor of trans rights if you are not taking every opportunity, every action to resolve this state of affairs, right? Because it's very clearly the transphobes who are on a roll and who are winning and who are allowed to be in politics and to promulgate this political program of theirs in the first place, right? You know, the Supreme Court case last year, like Scrimeti versus Tennessee, I think, was the one that decided, okay, like, states are allowed to pass laws criminalizing gender-affirming care for trans minors. And that should have been the fucking 5-alarm fire for any party in any position of power that considers itself that considers itself on the side of trans people, right? Because that's a direct strike on our ability to exist, on our ability to reproduce, like, socially. Like, it's directed at children as a wedge to eventually expand these sorts of bans to adults, right?
Yeah,
Because
it's
oh
a
my
very
god,
easy step.
right, and of course the if anybody is asking you, like, well, what about this, like, what does it do to your, like, bone density or whatnot, they're lying to you.
Yeah.
Like, the science is already settled on this. Access to transition care at all ages is healthcare. It
Period.
Yeah, it improves physical, improves mental well-being. To deny it is to commit, yes, an act of mass slaughter.
Yeah. And I like to point out, I know it doesn't do any good to point out hypocrisy because these people are immune to their own hypocrisy. But when people, first of all, top surgery is not being performed on minors. That is not a thing that is happening at all. But with parental permission, girls as young as 16 can get breast implants. So that's okay. And they like to talk about quote unquote genital mutilation. And yet these people circumcise their sons. So, like,
Yeah.
I don't know what we're fucking doing here. Like, at least be consistent across the board.
Yeah, of course, NYU Langone just recently, I don't know if it's Langone or whatever. I don't fucking care to pronounce it properly. That's they're a private institution in New York City that just ended trans care for minors. You can go to BlueSky and you can search through nyc.mayor.gov. Just put in the word trans. There is one tweet about it, and silence otherwise. This, by the way, from Zoran Mamdani had stuff in his platform laid out for just such an occasion, right? Diverting funds to New York H&H to make up the shortfall, to absorb patients that are rejected, right? He has the legal authority to levy fines for human rights violations on this institution that is committing them by denying this care. But silence for the past 2 weeks and change. Very interesting.
Yeah, and they're making this decision on their own. Like, they're not, like, in Texas and being forced to stop doing these things. New York is not doing that. I have more bad news before we get to the good news part of this. This TGEU, and I'm sorry I did not write down what that stands for, their Trans Rights Index and Map 2025 reveals an unprecedented reversal. For the first time in its history, setbacks in human rights of trans people across Europe and Central Asia now clearly outweigh progress. This regression signals more than just a crisis for trans communities. It is a broader crisis of democracy and fundamental rights across the region. This is not merely a cultural rollback, but a strategic assault on fundamental freedoms, equality, and democracy. It is a defining moment, the new trans tipping point. As trans people fight for autonomy over their bodies and identities, Europe struggles for its identity and sovereignty. I don't know about that last part, but whatever.
Well, I mean, Europe in many ways is certainly not sovereign from U.S. imperialism, right?
No.
They're on the forefront of global imperialism, certainly, but they're also, subordinated to the big imperialist,
the hegemon. And then the little positive bit I have here, South America has some of the most progressive legislation in the world regarding transgender rights. Bolivia and Ecuador are among the few countries worldwide that offer constitutional protection against discrimination based on gender identity.
Let's fucking go.
Yeah, very cool. That's probably why we're bombing Ecuador.
Yeah, there's a couple reasons for that.
Yes. And then I wanted to end just with some numbers about education. In the U.S., women are getting more college degrees than men. Associate's degrees, 61% are women. Bachelor's, 58%. Master's degrees, 61% are women. And doctorate degrees, 54% of those getting them are women. So across the board, we are more highly educated.
I love retroactively skewing the numbers by transitioning after college.
Yes. That's amazing. But on top of that, women often carry more student loan debt, with 71% of women graduates having debt 12 months after graduation compared to 64% of men, thanks to the pay gap.
God.
So you win some, you lose some.
Has the has the law like come into place yet, allowing student loan processors to garnish your wages?
No, is that a thing they passed?
They've been talking about it. I can't remember if it's been passed or not, but I keep waiting for this enormous bubble to pop because it's going to.
Yeah. I saw that Iran had hackers looking into wiping out all of our credit card debt, and I'm like, please.
That would be incredible. You fucking kidding me? Oh my god.
Project Mayhem is gonna happen. Yeah, I saw people arguing about it online, and they're like, that doesn't make any sense. Why would they do that? And I'm like, because it hurts the ruling class. What are you talking about? Why would they do that? It's amazing. Because they're smart, and the U.S. blows up schools and hospitals, and Iran wipes out debt for the working class. Holy shit, man. They know how to get us on their side, I guess. Last little bit of stats here. Globally, women still make up roughly 2/3 of all the adults that are unable to read. And in conflict areas, essentially war zones, girls are more than twice as likely to be out of school as compared to peacetime. And a lot of times it's early pregnancy, marriage, and household duties that force girls out of school, even if they had started along with their male siblings. So, that is all the information I had on the document. Did we learn anything?
A lot of grim stuff.
Yeah.
A lot of really encouraging stuff. Because, again, historically, this fight has been ongoing for, centuries, millennia, right?
Yeah.
In various forms of organization. And we can see how it's played out and what's worked and what hasn't. I have many reasons to be pessimistic about where we are, the direction that we're going, certainly. But, it's tied to the resistance that we've been seeing, not just on this front, but also on the immigration front, right? Also on the anti-war front, right? There are people there is a new wave of organization, and you see it especially in like Minneapolis, right? Sweeping this country, not on a national scale certainly, but at least at a local level. I think there are a lot of communities starting to wake up and talk to each other. And I just have to engage with that, A, and B, continue to believe that it's happening. I don't know. It's tough to be trans right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And in case anybody hate listened this far and is like, where are they talking about immigration and trans? Because women exist in all of these communities. Because it's all fucking connected. Fuck, man. Honestly, if you hate listen to my podcast, you should subscribe to the Patreon to hate me.
I do not envy you the messages that you will get over this one, Jen.
Okay, so what I do now is on Twitter, I always have replies turned off. And I learned that when you upload onto YouTube, you can also put it to where you have to subscribe before you can comment. And you have to be subscribed for only a full 24 hours. But very rarely is someone going to do that and then come back and leave a hate comment. So ever since I started doing that, my comments are lovely and supportive.
Except for like the one or two people who are just 24 hours like all day. Oh man, I can't wait to stick it to this tranny.
And then they just get blocked. It's that easy. It's so easy. If you want to hate me, don't leave a comment and then you won't get blocked. That's my advice for my haters.
I do think that as far as I don't know, as the dimensions of transphobia, of patriarchy in general are kind of murky, like there are so many fewer people who know what trans people are, I still think, than who actively think that we're perverts, that we're dangerous, whatever, right? And there are so many fewer people certainly who actively hate women than just passively perpetuate patriarchy, but that's what makes it so insidious, right? Because it's so deeply rooted that there's so much to unpick
Yes.
in one's attitudes, in one's beliefs, in one's actions, especially if you're a man. You know, and I don't know.
Yeah, and I think it's on. I actually I look at my stats pretty regularly. My listenership is over 70% male. And so I know you guys are all lovely, and you're woke and you're feminists. And so my challenge to you is that I'm sorry, but it's your fucking job to take this struggle to the other men in your life. You know, I do it as best I can. I'm sure Lenore does it as best she can, but it's really not our fucking job. It is your job with your male privilege when your homeboys say misogynist shit, make transphobic jokes, whatever it might be, even if it seems harmless enough at the time, it is your job to call them out on that. Call them in if you want to be extra woke about it. I don't know, man, but like tell them that it's not okay, that is actually insulting, and that what they are doing is upholding patriarchy. And if they push back on it, I mean, you don't have to be a dick about it. You can punch them in the face. I support that. I always support fisticuffs. I'm a huge fan of fisticuffs. But, you know, it is our job as socialists to take part in this struggle.
Yes.
And as a man, it is your job to call out your homeboys when they say misogynist and transphobic fucked up shit. I'm sorry, that it just is your job, and you have to do a better job of it. The statistics of how many women have been sexually assaulted and raped are astronomical. Ask any woman you know if she's been sexually assaulted. Almost all of us will say yes, in some form or fashion. Maybe not as far as actual like penetrative rape, but we have all been grabbed or groped or at the very least catcalled, which is still very inappropriate.
4 days. 4 days after I came out.
Jesus Christ! Congrats. And you don't do it. You're not that kind of guy. Great, congratulations. Some of your homeboys are. Some of your homeboys are. Statistically speaking, that's just the case. Period. And so when you see that, call it out and don't let them get away with it.
Facts.
Facts, bitch. My pronouns are she, bitch.
I like that. I'm keeping that.
Using that. Put that on my bio. All right, Lenore, anything you want to plug or leave us with words of wisdom?
Yeah, I mean, once again, you know, head on over to Workers Lit if you've caught up listening to How the Red Was Won and you haven't gotten enough of Jen. She's a regular fixture on the news half of our show, of course. Unfit to print. We kind of refer to it like internally that way, but like, yeah, every Wednesday, you know, we break down the news from an anti-imperialist, from a working person's perspective, from the perspective of, you know, somebody who doesn't write for the Washington Post and want to bomb Iran all day, you know, like. We got it all.
It's such a low bar. We don't want to bomb Iran. Listen to us. Oh, yeah, awesome. Do you want me to link your socials, or do you not want people to find you?
Oh, please, no. Okay. Like, yeah, you can link my BlueSky. You know, everybody's free to send me, you know, questions, comments, manifestos.
Ooh, manifestos. And the best thing about BlueSky is that the block actually works on that site, unlike Twitter.
Fuck.
Yeah, it's a good, solid block, actually. That is the one thing they do right over there. Awesome. Well, thanks for chit-chatting with me, Lenore. It's been a pleasure.
Oh, Jen, thank you so much for having me. This has been fun.
Awesome. And cheers.
Take care.
Oh, and happy International Working Women's Day.